Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another round of sound. This is the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. I'm Bob Pompeani. Lots, as always, to get into. We will talk about Tristan Jarry being demoted. We'll also get into the Pirates after they complete Pirate Fest. And what will we expect from them this season? But the #1 topic tonight, and it will be probably every week, is what the Steelers do at quarterback and the Steelers in general. And here to talk about it is your panel tonight, Jeff Hathhorn, Sports Director, 93.7 The Fan. In the middle is Ray Fittipaldo, who covers the team for the Post-Gazette, and Will Graves with the Associated Press. Go ahead.
Shout out, Wanda King.
Wanda always has to get the shout out. I figured we'd do it right off the bat. Wow. All right. Ray, I want to ask you about this. Everyone loves talking about quarterbacks. We've done it before. We'll do it again, so we're going to do it tonight. Where are the Steelers in terms of their future quarterback, knowing that pretty much everyone's one and done and now looking at free agency?
Yeah, Bob, I think they're still discussing it, but when I look at this football team, I see a team that's probably further away now than Super Bowl contention than any time in the last decade. I go back to those 2012, 2013 teams. They've both finished 8-8. And if you remember, that 13 team needed a great finish to get to 8-8. But the saving grace back then, Bob, was you had a quarterback to build around. Now you don't. I think Russell Wilson would be a good option if they had a better team around him. They don't. I think Justin Fields is probably the guy, and I think you could probably get him on the cheap too.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Ray. I mean, when we look at the teams that are still playing, in the AFC, you've got a Hall of Famer, you've got MVP candidates. In the NFC, you've got a really good quarterback, and then a guy that's in Jaden Daniels. Shout out Jaden Daniels, hail the Commanders, by the way.
Where's Dan Snyder, by the way?
Exactly. Standing outside, I think I saw him coming in. He's standing there holding a sign. I used to own a football team. But does this team look like they're close? And let's remember, all three of us are in there with Mike Tomlin on Tuesday, and when somebody asked him, you need a high draft pick, he brought up Jalen Hurts, and he brought up Lamar Jackson. Let's remember that the Steelers drafted Terrell Edmonds instead of Lamar Jackson, and they drafted Chase Claypool instead of Jalen Hurts. They thought Ben was going to play until he was 55, and he didn't, and now they're sort of stuck. And I mean, I don't want to say this is football justice, as Mike T talks about. They're getting what they deserve.
Well, the Steelers aren't going to go anywhere until they find a franchise quarterback. I think that's pretty obvious. And they need to do everything in their power to find a franchise quarterback. If that means trading anybody on this roster to find a franchise quarterback, do it. If that means spending no money and winning 4 games next year, it's about finding a franchise quarterback. It ain't about winning. It's not about what this stuff that's been going on for the last 8 years. It's about finding a franchise quarterback. Forget trying to find a way to get your way into the playoffs and if we get 17 turnovers in a game, we might win it 9-8.
Yeah.
But find a way to get that quarterback. Whatever it is you need to do, no one's off the table.
All right, Ray, following up on that point, TJ Watt's been mentioned quite a bit in trade discussions. People say, well, he's getting up there in age. They need help at quarterback. Would you trade him to get what you need? I know there was a Colin Cowherd twist out there about trading Watt and Pickens and 2 number 1s to move up for Shadur Sanders.
Yeah.
Would you go that far if you had to? Listen,
TJ wants to come back. I think the Steelers view him much in the same way as they view Cam Hayward as a one-helmet type of a guy. They want him to retire a Steeler. So I think that's a different discussion. I don't think it's going to happen. Now, should they do it? Maybe they should break, from their tendencies and make a move like that. But, for me, when a guy like TJ wants to be a part of your franchise, I think you try to do right by him, build around him. I do think he probably has 2 or 3 good years left. So maybe you can build it back up by the time his 2nd or 3rd year is here, and maybe you can.
Yeah, you look what Washington has done. I mean, in year 1, they were 4-13 last year. They got their guy, and now the next 10 years look great.
Top 2 in the draft.
Right. Correct. And I think maybe this year, to Ray's point, I think Justin Fields gives them the mobility that Mike wants. I think that there is enough for them. This is the problem. He's probably good enough for them to go 9-8, right? Like he probably is. So then what? And then
you don't think there's a bigger ceiling for him? You don't think?
I'm talking about next year, because to Ray's point, I think that the roster, the talent on the roster is just not good as a whole. Is not good enough. But that's sort of the problem. And I can see them. They sign him to a 2-year deal, with a 2nd year as an option, as a sort of a couple of prove-it years. But you can turn it around very quickly. So I would hold on to TJ, but it's how if he's your best trade chip, how do you get that guy?
Well, I would put it this way: if Mike Vrabel says, I want TJ Watt. I know what he could bring to our organization. And your quarterback is still there at 3, and you think that's going to be your franchise quarterback, hell yeah, I'd make that trade.
Do you think it would be just that? Because I think it would be, to get up to that level, you're going to have to trade a lot more.
Certainly the picks,
right? They're going to be not only exchanging this pick, maybe an additional.
I don't know.
Or
I mean,
well, TJ is going into the last year of his contract, so the Patriots would want to have to sign him for years beyond that.
Right. But
yeah.
let's say you'd have a deal, almost a deal in place, and you know that that's going to happen. I mean, TJ is still a very valuable player in this league. I'm just saying this franchise is going nowhere until they find a quarterback. So that's why I would absolutely listen to trades for TJ Watt.
Ray, what about, to mention Jeff's other part of this, about, just playing this thing out, see where it goes, and maybe you'll move up high enough just because of attrition that you're going to end up losing. 2026 looks like a better draft potential than 2025.
Yes.
Would they look to that as sort of a strategy?
Yeah, that's one thing we didn't mention. This is not considered a good quarterbacks class, 2025. Now, listen, you play it out with Justin Fields. They haven't done that under Mike Tomlin, but they did it a couple times under Bill Cowher, and they certainly did it a couple times under Chuck Noll as well. It doesn't happen often, but if you can hit it right, they went 6-10 in 03. They got Big Ben. Sometimes it's worth it.
Yeah, interesting.
But you wonder sometimes, though, I mean, these fans are upset about, not winning a playoff game in 8 years. How are they going to handle going 4-13? Like, I mean, what are we going to be talking about on here? We're going to be talking about fire the head coach,
We've done
right?
this with the Pirates for 10 years, right? And
I mean, I don't know. Like, it's but the Steelers fans are different. I mean, they're used to a different standard of living.
Aren't we getting to the point, though, of them understanding, like, you know what, in order to get one of those big picks, you need to have a down year.
It's one thing to say that, it's another thing to actually do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And it seems like it doesn't ever happen.
I mean, like, the diet sounds great on January 1st, and on January 17th, they're like, oh my God, give me a chocolate bar, right? So I think, like, if they're 1-4, we're on here killing everybody, right? Like, that's what we're doing. Even though we know at the end of the rainbow, maybe there's the third pick in the draft next year.
All right, we got to go to break. When we come back, we'll talk about other potential trade candidates, including George Pickens. What's his future, and does it include the Steelers? We'll get into that. We'll also talk about the Penguins and the Pirates in this edition of the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. Don't go away. All right, when you're one and done, a lot of questions arise, and that's what we're talking about on this edition of the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. This week, Adam Schefter reported that the Chicago Bears had interest in talking to the Steelers about a trade for Mike Tomlin, who has a no-trade clause. Jeff, is that something they should have considered?
Yeah, and that's my point about TJ Watt. I'm not openly shopping him, but I'm listening to if there's an offer for him. Same with Mike. I don't know why you wouldn't listen. Now, maybe they knew what the offer was. Maybe they thought it was going to be low, and they just wanted to squash that right there. But I'm listening to anything that could make the team better.
I think the Rooneys told us how they felt about Mike Tomlin when they extended him for 3 years.
Correct.
In the summer, which they've only done once in the previous 18 years. I think when Art Rooney's going to meet with us, I think in another week or two, that's probably one of the first questions he's going to be asked. Why did you go to 3 years this time around? And, there's all this speculation about job security. But I think from the franchise's perspective, there is no question. That's their guy, and that's who they want coaching.
I mean, which, and again, we were all in there on Tuesday, and remember a year ago when Mike T talked, he was emotional, like there was some uncertainty about his status going forward. But this time, like, it was sort of, whatever, because like he has security. There wasn't any sort of question about his status. So if you're the Bears, of course, you're maybe interested in Mike Tomlin. You got a potential franchise quarterback and a guy with a pedigree that, when he has a Hall of Fame quarterback in the prime of his career, is pretty good. But the problem is, if Mike Tomlin has a no-trade clause and doesn't want to move, what's the point? The Bears could throw 5 number ones at him, and the Steelers and Mike's like, nah, I'm good.
But maybe the whole thing is Chicago's trying to say, hey, look how serious we are. We got it out there that we're interested in trading for Mike Tomlin, even though we knew that would never happen.
But, Ray, we haven't seen any moves from the coaching staff. I was led to believe there'd be something. There are some contracts that have expired. What is going to happen there?
There will be. I think the first week after the season ends, it's a lot of exit interviews for the players. But I think you'll see some news on that in the next week or two. A lot of people want Terrell Austin to go. He's under contract, Bob. They don't typically move on from guys under contract. Same goes with offensive line coach Pat Meyer. He is under contract as well. So if they did that, they would be going against the grain of what they typically do.
And they have gone against the grain of what they've done. I mean, when they fired Matt Canada last year. However, you know, I mean, it's Terrell Austin's defense. It's not. It's Mike
Right.
Tomlin's defense. So, you know, you can let Butts walk away. You can have Dick LeBeau retire or whatever. But firing a guy who's running your defense, I mean, Mike has a healthy regard for himself. And I think that would be him admitting a mistake like that. And I just don't see that happening.
All right, George Pickens, I want to ask you about this, Jeff, because now he's another focal point, and it seems to me that they've run into this dead end. He's in the final year of a contract. He's a second-round pick. There's no fifth-year option. What do? Do they trade him? Do they sign him? Do they believe in him? Do they just play it out?
I mean, I'm not in the signing camp. I mean, you would like to think that you could get through to him that, hey, you're going to cost yourself a lot of money, millions of dollars, if you don't come out with effort and be able to show what you can do for another team. And in fairness, the Steelers would never be able to afford, you know, they're getting him so cheap for the talent if you can get him right. But then you're playing that game again. Can you get him to be the guy that you think he can be consistently?
Yeah. Listen, he is cheap, so if he plays out the final year, it's not costing you anything. But there does come a certain point where you worry about, is he a cancer in the locker room? Is he infecting that building in other ways that maybe we're not privy to? So he is a talented guy, but it feels like maybe they should move on from him.
I mean, and let's remember that the track record of this team, once the juice no longer becomes worth the squeeze, they move on. And we're 50 games into his career. This isn't like a rookie year and he's adjusting. I mean, he's 3 years in. And I asked Mike T point blank, shouldn't there have been more progress at this point? And he said, whatever he said, meat on the bone or whatever. Yeah. I mean, like at this point, you kind of are who you are, right?
Right.
So,
but
the problem
guy,
is
and they don't have many talented guys.
Right, and that's the problem. Like, are they going to run the wishbone? You know, like, keep Cordero Patterson.
Do you trade him low, or do you hope that he has a good start to the season, and is he available to a team then?
People might scoff, oh, they're only going to get a third-round pick for him. Third-round pick. They got AB, but they also this year got Peyton Wilson. They traded Kenny Pickett.
AB was a sixth-round pick, wasn't he? He was
right, but they traded a third-round pick, and they used it on Deontay Johnson. But Peyton Wilson was acquired for a third-round pick that they got for Kenny Pickett. Sometimes people shoot high. You want a first-round pick, a second-round pick for guys. If you get a third-round pick for him, it's proven you can get good guys in the draft.
Let's remember, that the recent track record of guys in these contract situations. Najee, I thought, handled himself for the most part pretty classily all year. I mean, and that's a guy who is a team player and absolutely cares about winning.
Yep.
And now George, I just do not see him. If you don't extend him, it is very difficult for me to see him being a good soldier.
Except if you're his agent, you have to say you have to play because otherwise you're not going to get anything.
But I mean, look how long.
That's the incentive. That's the carrot.
Right.
Look at all that money in free agency.
The carrot's been there since his rookie year. Like the guys are supremely talented.
Yeah, but the carrot was farther away. Now the carrot is right in his face, and either you bite it or you don't. So I want to, before we run out of time here, I also want to talk about two other guys real quick. Jeff, back to you on this. I know you guys all have opinions on Minkah Fitzpatrick and Larry Ogunjobi. It just seems to me that Ogunjobi didn't show up enough for big plays, despite what they're and Minkah's just a heavy cost. What would you do with both?
Minkah I would keep. I still think there's value. Maybe he didn't have the greatest year this year, but I still think he's a good impact player. Ogunjobi is interesting because there's not a ton of depth on that defensive line.
Right.
But if you're going to improve the offense and you're going to spend a lot of money, you're going to have to take from somewhere, and I could see that as a possibility. But I'm not just immediately firing Ogunjobi out there.
Yeah, you could save $7 million if you cut Ogunjobi. Spend that $7 million elsewhere. Get a younger player. Ogunjobi is north of 30. As far as Minkah goes, it's a $15 million dead cap hit. They don't typically move on from those types of contracts. I think give him one more year. If he doesn't play well this year, then you can cut him next.
Maybe change the way you deploy him too, though, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
I mean, that's maybe the bigger problem. And Ray's great piece today in the Post-Gazette is keep cut. Piece. He talked about that specifically. I mean, he got 17 picks in his first 4 years, and now he's basically disappeared in the splash game. That's probably the bigger problem. Maybe Minkah's doing his job, but maybe his job needs to change.
Or get back to what it was when he first came here, when he made significant plays. We got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Tristan Jarry. He's no longer here. Will he ever return? That's next on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. All right, welcome back. The Penguins losers last night in Washington. And boy, how about the Capitals? Best team in the NHL. Who would have thought that? But the Penguins now still under 500, looking to try to get in, but they don't have Tristan Jarry. They decided enough was enough. They sent him down. Will, I want to ask you about him. I wasn't surprised. I still think they have some talent, young talent in their system. But have we seen the last of Tristan Jarry? What would be your game plan with him?
Well, I think we've seen the last of him as their number one goalie for sure. I mean, we're a groin pull, a wrist injury away from him being called back up, right? I mean, I think that it's entirely possible that he comes back up. But I mean, the bigger picture is, you mentioned the Capitals. The Capitals are where they're at because in 23, when they were sort of a fringe playoff team, their management decided, you know what, we're going to start selling off some pieces here and retooling. Then the Penguins, Kyle Dubas got that job in the spring or in July of 23, and he immediately signed Jarry. He was sort of against a rock and a hard place, but their inability to kind of realize where they're at has got them in this spot, and Jarry's just sort of one of the fall guys for it. I mean, I think the organizational failure goes far beyond Tristan Jarry.
And I know they're not all Kyle Dubas, but how many bad contracts are on this team right now? Jarry is one of the worst.
Graves is one of them, too.
Hey.
And Erik Karlsson as well, when you break it down. So, I mean, you if you're going to be a team that's going to rebuild like that, eventually you're going to have to rid yourself of some of those contracts. And you wonder if they continue down the losing path here, is it going to happen soon?
Well, you can't count on Graves. I mean, Graves never is going to come through. Graves always disappoints.
Work, doesn't like to get hit, likes to sit in the press box, eat his food, and look pretty. We all know this.
Listen, I do think Tristan will be back because, to Will's point, there'll be an injury and he'll be back. And your hope is that some contending team, like he gets on a heater and you could sell it and you take him a good chunk of the contract, much like we've seen Rutherford work deals in the past. I could see him being moved, but it was at least that's a sign to me that they're moving in the right direction. That they could get rid of a player like that. Even Lars Eller, like, hey, there are some guys that they're really not going to do much for us. We can sell that off. They have a little bit of value. I like, give Blomqvist, let him see let's see by the end of the year how he does. And if he's your goalie of the future, you may have to eat something with Jarry, but at least you found that out instead of hanging on to this belief of, well, there's 15 teams in front of us, but we're only 4 points out of the playoffs.
Well, they're still going to find themselves in that boat. So 1 minute left. Can they climb that mountain and get into the playoffs, or do you think it's even worth it?
Look, I have a lot of respect for Sid, so I'm going to say yes, they can, but should they? No.
They can, but their track record here over the ups and downs, roller coaster type of season, I don't think they will.
They can, but I hope they only do it by also looking at the future, that they don't go to the trade deadline and say, oh, you know what, I think we can make a run, and we add a contract and get rid of young guys.
That is the problem, I think. If they get to that point, the voices on that team may say, hey, give us something to get us over the hump.
I mean, points tell you they're still in it, but there's so many teams.
Right.
And when you watch them play, do they look like a playoff team?
No,
they do not.
No, even in Buffalo, I thought they were not the better team. We got to go to a break on that note. We'll come back and talk about Pirate Fest. It's over now. What do we expect from the Pirates in 2025? That's next. All right, Pirate Fest is now over, which means training camp's right around the corner. To me, the Pirates haven't done enough in this offseason with the good young pitching they have. Will, what's your thought on where they are and, what we expect in 2025? More of the same?
I mean, I guess sort of the good news is that it's not like the other guys in the division. I mean, the Cubs got Kyle Tucker, but it's not like, everybody else is loaded up. The Cardinals are trying to unload Nolan Arenado, but I mean, they want to win a bunch of games 2-1. I mean, that's just, when Spencer Horvitz seems like a really nice kid, he could be a 20 home run, 270, 65 RBI guy, but they've had a ton of those. It'd be nice to get a guy that could actually hit 30 home runs and drive in 100.
It requires money.
Yeah, they haven't made any moves of significance to this point, but Bob, we've seen this for 2 decades? They got a great ballpark, and now they have the number one star in Major League Baseball in Paul Skeens. They are going to draw. People thought this was the offseason to add to that. Maybe if they're in contention, maybe they'll make a move. But to me, they got to prove it.
Now, Skeens did tell us today that he believes that there will be more moves that will happen before the start of spring training.
Did he say more moves or more significant moves?
He said more moves. So, I mean, what are these guys going to say? I mean, they get put up in front of all of us.
I'm not expecting him.
Their thing is, listen, if this starting pitching is head and shoulders above everybody else, sure, they have a chance. When your starting pitching is that good, and they do have some good arms in the bullpen, but I agree with everything you guys are saying. They had a chance to really accent this and put some distance between themselves and other teams, but they didn't this
So one
season.
thing they could do is say, you know what, we didn't spend any money because we're buying out the first 3 years of Skeens' arbitration, and we're going to sign him to a 4-year, $130 million. Like, if they come forward and say that's what we're saving our money for, I think everybody would shut up. But they haven't. And Skeens today, by Kevin Gorman, got asked, have you thought about staying here long term? And he said, I haven't thought about it yet.
But
that's the overriding question with this
It's
franchise.
another thing to actually do it. They've said before that they're interested in signing, okay, sounds good.
And then they have done it with guys that are, I mean, let's remember, Kutch signed like the biggest sweetheart deal in the history. That little run they had, that was the starting point.
Right.
But man, they are really, if they signed him, Travis Williams would get questions about whether Bob's going to sell the team.
All right. Oh, it's
where
always
we are.
fun over there. Meantime, it's time to zero in on a new vehicle if you're looking for one right now at your local #1 Cochran store. You're going to love getting a whole lot of nothing. That's because at select locations, you can choose from 0% APR financing or 0 down payment leases. And they got 20 new car brands and more than 5,000 new vehicles to choose from. That's a lot. More than anyone else. There are 0 reasons to miss this event. Zero in on a new vehicle and schedule your test drive online at Cochran.com. Jeff is an Ohio State grad, so who wins, Ohio State or Notre Dame tomorrow national championship?
Really?
Yes,
You're asking
really.
me this? I mean, I have a lot of
Objective.
respect for Notre Dame, but Ohio State.
Buckeyes, Ryan Day gets the monkey off his back.
It's not Michigan, so Ohio State wins.
That's going to wrap it up for us. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next Sunday night, 11:35, right here for the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown.
Is that shorter?